In the city of Lagos, where horns never stop and the sun beats down on cracked roads, there was a compound in Suralere that people talked about in low voices. It was an old building, paint peeling, iron gate rusted at the hinges, but it stood strong. 3 families lived inside. They shared one borehole, one generator, and one landlord nobody had ever seen. The rent was collected every quarter by a quiet woman named Mama Addis. She came on foot. She wore no jewelry. Her wrapper was plain and her slippers were worn thin at the heel. Tenants called her the landlord's errand woman. They gave her the money. She counted it carefully, wrote the receipts, and left without eating or drinking. Nobody offered. Nobody asked her name. Nobody thought to ask. The compound had 3 main tenants. First was Chief Balogun, a fat man with a big voice who ran a spare parts shop on Lagos Island. He drove a black Jeep and parked it directly in front of the only good drainage channel, flooding everyone's doorstep when rain fell. He never apologized. Second was Mrs. Nneka Obiora, a shop owner from Anambra who sold fabrics in Balogun Market. She was sharp-tongued and always suspicious. Third was young Emeka, a struggling graphics designer who had sublet one room from Mrs. Obiora without the landlord's permission. These 3 people had one thing in common. They all looked down on Mama Addis whenever she came to collect rent. They saw a poor woman doing errands for a rich man. That is what they believed. That belief would cost them everything. The first time Chief Balogun was rude to her, Mama Addis said nothing. He had dropped an envelope of cash on the floor instead of placing it in her hand. "Pick it up," he had said, not even looking at her. She bent down, counted the money quietly, wrote the receipt, and walked away. Mrs. Obiora watched from her doorway and laughed. "That woman has no dignity," she said to her daughter. "See how she kneels for a man who doesn't even greet her." Her daughter, a girl of 17 named Chism, watched Mama Addis walk through the gate. There was something about the old woman's back, straight, unhurried, unbothered, that made Chism feel uneasy. She couldn't explain it. She just felt it, the way you feel a storm before the sky changes. Mama Addis had been collecting rent in this compound for 11 years. In all that time, not one tenant had offered her water. Not one had asked how her journey was. But Chism had once, just once, pressed a cold bottle of Fanta into her hands before her mother could stop her. Mama Addis had looked at the girl for a long moment. Her eyes were calm and deep, the kind of eyes that had seen many things and decided not to be moved by most of them. "Thank you, my daughter," she said. Her voice was soft but it carried weight, like a word spoken in a quiet room. She drank the Fanta slowly, standing at the gate. Then she handed back the bottle and left. That night, Chism dreamed of a large house with many rooms. She was in every one of them. Her mother was standing outside, knocking. Trouble began in March, when the Lagos state government sent a letter to the compound. The letter was addressed to the owner of the property. It mentioned a road expansion project. The government wanted to acquire part of the compound's land. Compensation would be paid, but only to the registered owner. Chief Balogun intercepted the letter first. He read it twice. His eyes went wide. He called Mrs. Obiora. She read it. She called Emeka. All 3 of them began to talk very fast. If there was compensation money, they wanted to know where it would go. They had been paying rent for years. They believed they had some right. They decided to find the landlord themselves, not through Mama Addis, but directly. They would go to the land registry on Monday morning. They told no one. But someone saw them whispering. Chism saw. And she felt that unease again. On Monday, the 3 tenants went to the Lagos State Land Registry at Alausa, Ikeja. The clerk pulled out the file for the property. Chief Balogun leaned forward, ready to memorize the landlord's name so he could find the man and negotiate directly. The clerk read the file. Then he read it again. He looked up at the three people standing before him. The registered owner of this property, the clerk said slowly, is one Mrs. Adis Mosu. The three tenants stared at him. That can't be right, Chief Baligan said. The landlord is a man. A big man. We have been paying him for years. The clerk turned the file around so they could see the name clearly. Mrs. Adis Mosu. Registered owner since 1987. There was a photograph attached to the file. It was Mama Adis. The quiet woman with worn slippers. She had not been collecting rent for someone else. She had been collecting her own rent. Mrs. Obiora was the first to speak on the drive back. It is not possible, she said. That woman who comes here with no bag, no car, no nothing, she owns that compound. Emeka said nothing. He was thinking about how he had once refused to greet her, pretending to be on a phone call that he was not on. Chief Baligan gripped his steering wheel hard. He thought about the envelope he had dropped on the floor. He thought about the day he had told her to wait outside like the help. He thought about the year he had paid rent 3 weeks late and she had said nothing, only written the receipt and left. He thought about all the years she had stood at his gate, patient, quiet, receiving his disrespect like someone who had already forgiven what had not yet been apologized for. His chest felt tight. He did not say it was shame. But it was. That evening, Chisholm's mother came home differently. She did not unpack her market bag at the door the way she usually did. She sat on the plastic chair outside their room and stared at the compound gate for a long time. "Mama, what happened?" Chisholm asked. Mrs. Obiora looked at her daughter. For a moment she looked like she wanted to lie. Then she looked away. "The woman who collects rent," she said quietly. "She is not an errand person." Chisholm waited. "She is the landlord," her mother said. "She owns everything." Chisholm was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "I know." Her mother looked at her sharply. "How?" Chisholm thought about the dream. She thought about the eyes. She thought about how a person can stand in front of you, plain and quiet, and you look right past them because you have already decided who they are. "I just knew," she said. Her mother did not argue. The next rent day came 2 weeks later. This time, when Mama Adis walked through the rusted gate, something in the compound had shifted. Chief Baligan came out of his flat before she reached his door. He greeted her first. His voice was stiff, like a man who had practiced the greeting but still found it uncomfortable. Mama Adis received it the same way she received everything, without drama, without visible pleasure. She said good morning back. She collected his envelope. She wrote the receipt. Mrs. Obiora came out too. She offered a seat. Mama Adis sat. She was brought water, cold water in a glass, not plastic. She drank it. Only Emeka stayed inside. He had not decided yet how to face what he had done. He watched through a crack in his curtain as the woman he had ignored for years sat in the compound she owned, come as someone who had never needed anyone's approval. What nobody in the compound knew yet was that the government's compensation offer was only the beginning. The road expansion would affect 3 plots. One of them was this compound. But there was a second letter, one that had not yet arrived, about a proposed commercial development on the adjoining land. Any property owner along that stretch of Sorelia Road would be offered partnership rights in a government-private development deal worth hundreds of millions of naira. Mama Adis already knew about this. She had known for 6 months. She had attended 2 meetings in Victoria Island about it, arriving quietly, sitting near the back, saying little. The developers there had assumed she was someone's secretary. She had let them assume. She had listened, learned everything, and then gone home to her quiet life in Mushin where she lived alone in a small flat. She was not poor. She was private. There is a difference. Mama Addis had bought the Suralaya compound in 1987 with money she saved working as a seamstress for 12 years. She had sewn wedding gowns and school uniforms and burial clothes. She had eaten gari and groundnut for years so that every spare naira could go into a bank account that nobody knew about. Her husband had died young, leaving her with one daughter and no inheritance. People had pitied her. Some had mocked her. A few had tried to take advantage of her. She had survived all of it not by fighting loudly but by moving quietly and building slowly. By the time people noticed she had something, she had already protected it. The compound was only one of 3 properties she owned in Lagos. But it was her first. And it was the one she visited herself, on foot, in plain clothes, every quarter. Not because she had to. Because she chose to remember where she started. Chief Balogun's spare parts business had been struggling. He owed 3 suppliers and had delayed payment twice. One of his suppliers, a man from Nui, had stopped picking his calls. He needed money. When he heard about the government compensation, he went to a lawyer friend and asked how he could claim some of it as a long-term tenant. The lawyer told him the truth: a tenant has no claim to compensation for land acquisition. Only the owner receives it. Chief Balogun left the lawyer's office and sat in his jeep for a long time. The woman he had dropped money on the floor for, she was about to receive a government check he could only dream of. He had spent years performing power over her. And all that time, she had held the paper that proved he could be removed from that compound with 3 months' notice. It was Emeka who finally broke. He was 29, from Imo State, trying to build a design business with a laptop that overheated and a Wi-Fi connection that cut out every evening. He had been subletting Mrs. Obiора's extra room for 2 years without informing the landlord, a clear violation of his rental agreement. When he learned who the landlord actually was, he began to panic. He drafted a letter of apology. He deleted it. He drafted it again. He deleted it again. One morning he left it under the door of Mrs. Obiора's flat. Mrs. Obiora read it and called him inside. "You think she doesn't know," she said. Emeka froze. "That woman knows everything that happens in this compound," Mrs. Obiora said quietly. "She has always known. The question is not whether she knows. The question is why she has said nothing." That silence, Emeka realized, was not ignorance. It was a decision. Chisholm started greeting Mama Addis at the gate whenever she visited, even on days that were not rent days. Sometimes Mama Addis came simply to check the borehole pump or to speak with the caretaker who lived in the boys' quarters. One afternoon, Chisholm walked beside her to the borehole area and asked her directly, "Mama, how did you buy this place?" Mama Addis looked at her for a moment. Then she said, "Thread by thread, my daughter. I sewed other people's dreams until I could afford my own." She checked the pump. It was fine. As she was leaving, she turned and looked at Chisholm once more. "You have sense," she said. "Don't let people rent space in your mind for free." Then she walked through the gate. Chisholm stood still for a full minute, turning those words over in her mind like someone turning a coin, trying to understand all its sides. The second government letter arrived on a Thursday. It was delivered by a courier in a white uniform with the Lagos State crest on his chest. He asked for Mrs. Addis Mosu. Chief Balogun came out and told the courier she didn't live there. The courier said he had been instructed to deliver only to the named recipient or her authorized agent. He waited. Mrs. Obiora called the number on the letter, a government office line. She was told the letter contained information about a commercial development partnership. The amount mentioned in the preliminary document was 240 million naira. Mrs. Obiora sat down on her doorstep. Chief Balogun, who had been listening, leaned against the wall slowly, like a man whose legs had gone soft. Neither of them spoke. The courier sat in his motorcycle and waited politely. He had been waiting for many minutes. He was patient. Like the owner of the letter. Mama Addis arrived 1 hour later. She had received a phone call from her caretaker. She came in a taxi, not a jeep, not an SUV, just a yellow Danfo taxi from Mushin. She stepped out, paid the driver, and walked through the gate. The courier handed her the letter. She signed for it. She read the first page standing at the gate while everyone in the compound watched from various distances, pretending not to watch. Then she folded the letter, placed it in her handbag, and told the caretaker she would send someone to fix the cracked wall near Flat B by Friday. She greeted Chief Baligan. She greeted Mrs. Obiora. She nodded at Emeka, who had finally come outside and was standing very still near the staircase. Then she called a new taxi and left. Nobody had seen what the letter said. They had only seen her face. And her face had shown nothing. Nothing at all. That evening, Mrs. Obiora knocked on Chief Baligan's door. He opened it quickly, as if he had been waiting. They sat in his parlor and spoke in the low, careful voices of people who know they have made mistakes and are now trying to calculate the cost. "We need to apologize to her properly," Mrs. Obiora said. Chief Baligan did not argue. They both knew that apology alone would not change anything legally. But there was something else, something human, that they needed to do. They had treated a woman poorly because she had appeared poor. They had assumed. They had mocked. They had looked through her like glass. And now they were sitting in a flat that belonged to her, on a compound she had bought with 12 years of seamstress work, trying to figure out how to undo what years of contempt had done. The answer, of course, was that you cannot undo it. You can only go forward differently. Chisholm's mother woke her up before dawn on Saturday. "Come," she said. They went together to Mama Addis' house in Mushin. Mrs. Obiora had gotten the address from the caretaker, who had hesitated before giving it. They arrived at a quiet street. The house was modest, a one-story building behind a small garden of potted plants. Mama Addis opened the door before they knocked, as if she had been expecting them or perhaps had simply heard the gate. She looked at Chisholm. She looked at Mrs. Obiora. She stepped back and led them inside. The parlor was clean and simple. No television. Shelves of books. A sewing machine in the corner, old but oiled and ready. Mrs. Obiora sat and began to speak. She spoke for a long time. She did not make excuses. Chisholm watched Mama Addis listen the way a river listens, still on the surface, but everything moving underneath. Mama Addis spoke when Mrs. Obiora finished. Her voice was even. "I am not angry," she said. "Anger is expensive. I cannot afford it." Mrs. Obiora blinked. "Then what do you feel?" she asked. Mama Addis was quiet for a moment. She looked at the sewing machine. "I feel what every person feels when they are made invisible," she said. "I feel the weight of it. But I also know that the people who made me invisible were not seeing me. They were seeing their own ideas about what poverty looks like, what power looks like, what a woman alone should be." She poured tea for them both. "I built what I built because I stopped asking people to see me and started building things they could not ignore." Chisholm felt something shift inside her chest. Something that had been tilted became straight. She did not have words for it yet. But she felt it. Chief Baligan came alone 2 days later. He drove to Mushin. He parked his jeep on the street and walked to the gate. He had brought nothing, no gift, no envelope. Just himself. Mama Addis' caretaker let him in. He sat in the simple parlor and waited. When she appeared, he stood up immediately. That alone surprised him, that his body moved before his mind told it to. He greeted her with respect. Real respect this time, not the performance of it. He began to speak. Halfway through his first sentence, his voice cracked. He stopped. Started again. He told her about the envelope on the floor. He told her about the times he had raised his voice. He told her about the day he had called her, that woman, to his wife on the phone, not knowing she could hear through the louvered window. Mama Addis listened. When he finished, she said simply, "I heard that call." He closed his eyes. News travels fast in Lagos. Within 3 weeks of the letter arriving, people in the neighborhood had heard. A woman who collected rent on foot owned a compound sitting on land worth over 200 million naira. The story grew as stories do. Some people exaggerated, some disbelieved, some went to the land registry themselves to confirm. Journalists showed up twice. Mama Addis did not speak to them. Her lawyer released a one-sentence statement: "Mrs. Nosu is a private citizen and property owner. She has no comment at this time." But inside the compound, the atmosphere had changed completely. Tenants spoke to each other differently. They looked at strangers differently. A market woman who came to sell tomatoes at the gate every morning was suddenly treated with curiosity instead of dismissal. One person who is more than they appear makes you wonder about everyone else. Lagos teaches many lessons. This one, some people paid for with years of regret. Emeka finally knocked on Mama Addis' door in Mushin on a Tuesday evening. He came by bus, not motorcycle. He stood at the gate and asked the caretaker if she was in. She was. He was let in. He sat and could not speak for the first minute. Mama Addis waited without helping him. Finally he said, "I sublet the room without your permission. I have been living in your compound dishonestly." She nodded. She already knew. "I'm sorry," he said. She looked at him carefully the way she had looked at Chisholm at the gate. "What do you do?" she asked. He told her. "Graphics design." She nodded slowly. "My daughter needs someone to redesign her company's branding materials," she said. "I will send you her number. The work pays fairly." Emeka stared at her. She looked back calmly. "The sublet issue," she added, "will be formalized properly in a new agreement. Bring your documents Friday." That was all. Mama Addis' daughter was called Ngozi. She was 40 years old and ran a catering company that supplied food to 3 hospitals and a university in Ogun State. She had inherited her mother's quietness and her mother's sharpness. When Emeka called her, she was brief and professional. She hired him after seeing 3 samples of his work. Within a month, he had redesigned her company's logo, menus, and marketing materials. The catering company's social media following tripled. Ngozi called her mother to report. Mama Addis listened and said, "Good." Then she added, "Help that boy properly. He has ability but nobody has invested in him." Ngozi understood. She hired Emeka full-time as her company's in-house designer. He moved out of the sublet room. He took a proper flat, not in Mama Addis' compound. He didn't feel right staying. He needed to build his own foundation. That, Mama Addis said when she heard, was exactly correct. The government development partnership was signed 8 months after the letter arrived. Mama Addis attended the signing in a blue Ankara dress with gold buttons. Ngozi sat beside her. The developers who had thought she was a secretary the first time she attended their meetings recognized her when she was introduced as the property owner and principal partner. Some of them shifted in their seats. One reached out to shake her hand a little too eagerly. She shook it without expression. Chief Balogun read about the signing in the newspaper. Mrs. Obiora heard about it from a woman in her fabric market. Chisholm saw a photograph of Mama Addis at the signing ceremony posted on a Lagos community Facebook group. She downloaded the photo and kept it on her phone. Not as a trophy or a gossip piece. As a reminder of what patience looks like. Of what building looks like. Of what it means to know who you are before the world figures it out. The old compound in Suralere still stands. The paint is fresh now. Mama Addis had it repainted last dry season. The gate no longer creaks. The borough pump works every day. Chief Balogun renewed his tenancy and paid 3 months ahead. Mrs. Obiora expanded her fabric storage into the back room she had always wanted. Chisholm gained admission to study business at Lagos State University. On her first day, she carried a small notebook her mother had given her. On the first page, Mrs. Obiora had written one sentence in her careful handwriting: "Do not decide what a person is worth before you learn who they are." The compound caretaker told Chisholm, before she left for school, that Mama Addis had asked after her. "She said to tell you," the caretaker reported, "that the thread is yours now. Do not waste it." Chisholm held those words the entire bus ride. In Lagos traffic, with horns and heat and the city pressing in from every side, she held them tight.